The village of Thistlehollow slept under a sky full of stars. The wind whispered lullabies to the trees, and the ocean below the cliffs sang a song only night could hear. Yet, high above it all, the moon hung in silence, not whole, but broken. From the windows of a crooked little cottage, a boy named Elian watched the moon each night. He was small for his age, with tousled hair the color of dark honey and eyes full of wonder. He never minded being alone, not really, for he had the stars to speak to, and the moon to keep him company. But lately, the moon looked different. It had changed from its usual glowing smile to something sadder. A long, jagged crack split across its middle like a scar of silver glass. At first, Elian thought it might just be a cloud's shadow. But night after night, the crack remained. And the moon's light seemed dimmer, less sure of itself. "Elian, bedtime," called old Nan from the other room. She was not his grandmother by blood, but she was all the family he had. She brought him warm porridge, knitted socks, and stories that wrapped around his dreams like patchwork quilts. "One more minute," Elian whispered, not loud enough to be heard. He pressed his hand against the windowpane. The moon stared back at him with a quiet ache, like it needed help but had forgotten how to ask. "If I were up there," Elian thought, "maybe I could fix it." In his heart, he believed it. Because sometimes, when you've fixed broken toys, stitched old books, or tended wounded birds, you start to think nothing is too broken to heal, not even the moon. He finally tucked himself into bed, but sleep was restless. His dreams swirled with silver dust and echoes of quiet sobbing from above. A voice, soft and far away, whispered through his dream. "He sees us. The one who watches. The boy with the mender's heart." Elian stirred, a shiver running across his back. But when he sat up, the room was still. Only the moonlight spilled gently across the wooden floor, casting its faint and fractured glow. The next morning, the village folk noticed it too. "The moon's been lookin' ill," muttered the baker's wife as she kneaded dough. "Bad sign," said the fisherman, staring up as his nets dried. "Never seen it cracked like that." Even the children stopped their games at twilight to stare up, nervous and quiet. But no one did anything. Only Elian felt the moon's pain like a string pulled inside his chest. And deep inside him, a decision quietly sparked. "If no one else will help, then I will." That night, he packed a satchel with thread, tiny tools, some honey bread, and a glass jar with a little candle. He wrapped himself in his warmest scarf and waited until old Nan's snores filled the house. Then he opened the door to the chill night air and stepped out beneath the cracked moon. "Don't worry," he whispered to the sky. "I'm coming." Far above, unseen by most eyes, a single sliver of silver light slipped from the moon like a teardrop, and began to fall. The silver light fell swiftly from the sky, trailing stardust like a glowing ribbon behind it. It curved over the sea, dipped past the cliffs of Thistlehollow, and vanished into the hills beyond the village, just as Elian stepped out into the night. He saw it, a streak of light so bright it stole the breath from his lungs. "A falling star," he whispered in awe, shielding his eyes. But as it vanished over the horizon, something inside him stirred, like a string had been plucked from deep in his chest. "That wasn't just a star," he said to the wind. "That was a sign." He clutched the strap of his satchel and started to run. Past the sleepy cottages. Past the crooked garden fences. Past the mossy bridge where frogs croaked lullabies to the moon. His lantern bobbed in the darkness, casting warm light on the path ahead. The hills were quiet but not silent. As he reached the ridge, the air shimmered. It was cooler here, and the stars seemed brighter. A strange hush wrapped around the land, as though the world was holding its breath. And then he saw it. A crater, small but glowing, nestled between two ancient oak trees. The grass around it had turned silver. At the center lay something pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat made of light. Elian approached slowly. The glow was soft, not blinding, and it filled his chest with a gentle warmth. The object was no larger than a teacup, but it shimmered with power beyond anything he had known. It was a shard, a broken piece of the moon. He knelt beside it, heart pounding. As he reached out, the shard responded, not with heat or cold, but with a feeling, like a voice without sound. "You heard us," it said inside his mind. "You saw us. You are the one." Elian blinked. "Me. But I'm just a boy. A boy who listens. A boy who cares." The shard lifted gently into the air, hovered before him, and released a soft pulse. Instantly, lines of silver light spread from its core into the ground around Elian, forming a shape, a map. But this was no ordinary map. It shimmered with moving stars and glowing paths that twisted through clouds, forests, and realms Elian had never seen. The final point on the map pulsed brighter than the rest. The moon. Elian stood in the circle of starlight, feeling both terrified and brave. He wasn't a hero. He didn't have armor, or magic, or wings. But he had something else. A mender's heart. "I'll do it," he whispered, not knowing how or when or even why exactly. "I'll help you." As soon as he spoke the words, the shard floated toward him and gently settled in his palm. It was weightless, but it filled his hand with warmth and quiet strength. Suddenly, a breeze picked up, soft at first, then swirling stronger. The trees rustled like they were whispering secrets. Fireflies lifted into the air around him, dancing like living stars. The map of light vanished into the earth, but the path remained inside Elian's heart. And then a voice, soft as moonlight, spoke once more. "Follow the wind. The sky awaits." Elian looked up. Above him, the cracked moon still glowed faintly, but for the first time, a thin silver thread extended down from its surface, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. The path to the sky had begun. And Elian was ready to follow. The silver shard nestled in Elian's palm, glowing faintly as he followed the wind through the hills. It wasn't an ordinary wind. It tugged gently at his scarf, pushed him down the right paths, and hummed a song that made no sound but carried meaning in its rhythm. Elian trusted it. He moved through the night like a shadow of starlight, across stone paths and ferny glades, guided only by the soft pull in his chest. The world around him had grown quieter, as if holding its breath for something extraordinary. Then he saw it. In the heart of a meadow stood a tree unlike any other. Its bark shimmered like polished pearl. Its leaves glowed with the hue of moonlight passed through water. Each branch curved like a painter's brushstroke, delicate yet impossibly strong. Tiny orbs of silver floated around it, like captured sighs or forgotten dreams. "The Luma tree," Elian whispered. He didn't know how he knew the name. The shard in his hand pulsed gently, as if confirming it. Elian stepped forward. The moment he passed beneath its glowing canopy, the wind stopped. Not harshly, but reverently, like bowing before something ancient and kind. Then the leaves began to move. Not from wind, but from within. They rustled in patterns, spiraling, shaking gently. And then, they spoke. Not in words exactly, but in thoughts. "Elian. Mender. Dreamer." He gasped. "You know my name." The tree shimmered. "We have waited. The sky has waited. The moon called. You answered." He stepped closer. "I want to help. I have the shard. But I don't know how to get there, how to reach the moon." The Luma tree's branches arched, and a single glowing leaf drifted down and hovered before him. Upon its surface was etched a symbol, a spiral of light with a dot at the center. As Elian touched it, a memory not his own flooded through him. A path made of clouds. A stairwell woven from wind. A bridge threaded with moonlight. And always, always, the whispering wind as a guide. The leaf dissolved into stardust, and the tree rustled again. "You must climb the ladder of clouds." Elian tilted his head. "Where do I find it?" The branches pointed east, toward the cliffs beyond Thistle Hollow. The place where the land kissed the sky. "But the cliffs end in air," Elian murmured. "Not for those who believe," the Luma tree replied. Before he could ask more, one of the glowing orbs drifted toward him and hovered at his shoulder. Then another, and another. They circled him like stars caught in a dance. The Luma tree rustled once more. "They will guide you. Trust their light." Elian nodded, overwhelmed by awe and gratitude. "Thank you." As he turned to go, the wind returned, lifting his scarf and tickling the edges of his satchel. The silver shard warmed against his skin. He looked back once more at the tree, glowing like a piece of the moon itself. "Goodbye," he whispered. And the leaves replied, in a song made of light and breath. Not goodbye, only onward. With the moonlight winking through the trees and glowing orbs lighting his way, Elian followed the whispering wind once more, toward the cliffs, toward the sky, and toward the ladder of clouds. The sky was changing. By the time Elian reached the cliffs of Thistle Hollow, dawn was still far off, but the stars had begun to shift, as if making room for something. The whispering wind circled his shoulders like a familiar friend, and the silver shard in his pocket pulsed steadily, guiding him, warming him. Before him, the cliffs dropped steeply into the sea, where waves crashed like slow drums in the dark. But Elian didn't stop at the edge. Because now, he could see it. A glimmer, a shimmer, a staircase, impossibly delicate, impossibly tall, spiraled up into the sky. Each step was made not of stone or wood, but of cloud. Soft, shimmering, glowing with the same pale light that lived inside the moon. Threads of silver bound the edges of each step, anchoring it to the sky above and the wind below. The ladder of clouds, Elian breathed, the name rising in him as if it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. He took a deep breath. One step. The cloud compressed gently under his foot like soft wool. He climbed another, then another. The ladder didn't sway, because it wasn't tied to the earth. It was tied to belief. The glowing orbs from the Luma tree rose around him, lighting each step with soft encouragement. The wind whispered in his ears, a constant comfort. As he rose higher, the village below grew small. The rooftops, the trees, the river like a silver ribbon, all of it became a map painted by stars. And still, he climbed. Past owls riding the wind, past clouds shaped like animals and dreams, past things he didn't have words for, floating lanterns shaped like songs, and glowing fish swimming through air. Elian's legs began to ache, but he didn't stop. He was rising now above the sky he had once known. The air changed, crisp and clean and charged with something ancient. The clouds thinned, and stars shone brighter, closer. Some of them blinked at him as if pleased to see him. Then, at last, he reached a platform of cloud wider than a cottage roof. It floated alone, surrounded by stars, and in the center stood a silver archway. It was carved from something that shimmered between moonstone and memory. Symbols curled along its frame, spirals, stars, and tiny stitches that looked like threads being pulled together. Elian stepped through it. Instantly, he was no longer in the sky of Earth. He had entered a realm beyond, where clouds folded like curtains, and the air shimmered with silver breath. This was the place between the worlds. The shard pulsed in his pocket, stronger than ever. And then, out of the mist, came voices. Low, melodic, like thunder and starlight woven together. You who have climbed, you who have mended, you who have dared. Shapes began to appear in the cloudlight, beings with long limbs and wings made of constellations. Their eyes glowed softly, and their robes flowed like ink across the stars. Elian stood very still. These were the guardians of the forgotten sky. And they were waiting. Elian stood before them, heart thudding like thunder trapped in his ribs. The guardians of the forgotten sky hovered just above the cloudstone platform, beings not of flesh but of starlight and memory. Each one glowed with their own light, one as golden as dawn, another as blue as midnight, and a third like twilight spun into silk. Their eyes held galaxies. Their presence, though silent, rang like a cord plucked across the heavens. None of them spoke aloud, but Elian felt their voices in the very center of his chest. Elian, mender, believer, you have crossed the veil. He took a step forward, feeling both very small and very brave. I found a shard. From the moon. I want to fix it. The guardian whose wings glittered with ice-colored stars tilted their head. Few see the moon's wounds. Fewer still choose to care. The second guardian, warm and golden, circled Elian slowly. The moon was once whole. But even light can break when forgotten. The third, draped in violet mist, drifted closer and extended a hand. In their palm floated something that pulsed gently, another moon shard, slightly larger than Elian's. It hovered toward him and merged with the piece in his satchel without a sound. Elian's eyes widened. There are more. 10 fragments remain, the guardians said in one voice. Scattered among the realms of above. Hidden in silence, storm, sorrow, and sleep. Elian squared his shoulders. Then I'll find them. All of them. There was a moment of stillness. Then the guardians opened their arms in a gesture of blessing. From the skies behind them descended a small object wrapped in starlight. It unraveled mid-air to reveal a strange item, a needle made of silver light and a spool of glowing thread. Elian caught it gently. The thread of the mender, the guardians intoned. Forged from dawn's first breath and stitched with the echo of dreams. It can bind what was thought unfixable. Elian clutched the thread and needle tightly. Thank you. The ice-winged guardian turned toward the horizon, where the stars rippled like waves. Your next path leads to the moon's heart. It beats weakly now, hidden deep in the crater of silence. A portal shimmered into view, an oval of swirling silver mist shaped like a rising moon. Step through, Elian, whispered the golden guardian. And remember, even the smallest hand can steady the stars. With a breath both nervous and sure, Elian stepped forward. The portal wrapped around him like soft wind and candlelight. For a heartbeat, the world was still. Then he was gone, onward to the next part of his journey. When Elian opened his eyes, the world had changed again. He stood on a plain of quiet silver, so vast, so hushed, that it felt like time had stopped breathing. Above him loomed the fractured curve of the moon itself, its glowing face pale and fragile. Shards still floated nearby, suspended in slow orbits like forgotten dreams drifting through space. But beneath his feet, at the center of everything, was a crater. Not empty, no, far from it. At the crater's heart pulsed a glow so faint, so tender, it barely flickered against the darkness. It was like a candle on the edge of going out. This was the moon's heartbeat, the core of its light, the ancient pulse that once lit up skies and guided tides. Elian stepped carefully toward the center. As he approached, his own heartbeat slowed, as if syncing with the rhythm beneath him. The closer he came, the more he could feel the pain. Not pain like wounds, but sorrow, long, deep, and old. This was no simple break. This was a hurt born of being forgotten. Elian dropped to his knees. The shard in his satchel pulsed softly in response. He pulled it out and held it to the glowing core. The moon's heart pulsed once, then again, just slightly stronger. He reached for the needle and the silver thread given by the guardians. His hands shook. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he stitched it wrong? What if it shattered instead? Then he remembered old Nan's voice long ago, when he first tried to mend her worn scarf. There's no wrong way to care. Every stitch you try means you're trying to love something back to life. With that memory warming him, Elian leaned in and placed the first stitch. It glowed. Then the next. And the next. The thread pulled gently as he sewed cracks closed, not to hide them, but to hold them, honor them. He did not erase the break. He wove light through it. For hours, maybe days, maybe moments, he worked, not stopping even as tears mixed with stardust on his cheeks. And then, it happened. The core pulsed stronger, brighter. A rhythm returned. Not perfect, but alive. The moon's heartbeat was back. Elian sat back, breathless, tears slipping silently down his face. He hadn't fixed everything, not yet, but he had restored the rhythm, the courage to shine again. The ground around him shimmered. The air rang softly, like distant bells. And slowly, from the shadows, floating toward him on beams of light, came another shard, drawn by the heartbeat he'd reignited. The third piece. It hovered in the air, and as Elian reached for it, it merged with the others, forming a crescent shape in his hands. But before he could stand, the wind changed. Cold, sharp, wrong. Darkness crept at the edge of the crater, swirling like ink dropped in water. Whispers curled out from the shadow, hissing. You cannot heal what is meant to fade. Hope is a lie. You are just a boy. Elian's light dimmed. Doubt clawed at his chest. But the moon's heartbeat pulsed again, softly, like a whisper that said, remember why you began. He clutched the glowing crescent to his chest. I'm not perfect, he said aloud, voice shaking. But I care. And that's enough to try. The silver thread around him shimmered like armor. And the darkness, for now, recoiled. The darkness retreated, for now. Elian stood at the rim of the moon's heart, his hands still glowing from the final stitch. The crescent-shaped shard hovered before him, now larger and steadier, pulsing gently with the rhythm he had restored. He tucked it into the satchel beside the others, 3 pieces reclaimed, 7 more to go. And in the silence that followed, something stirred. The silver thread in his hand glowed brighter. It shimmered not only with moonlight, but with something deeper, purpose. The very air around him vibrated with energy, and the needle danced between his fingers like it knew what came next. Then, out of the horizon of the moon itself, came the starweavers. They emerged from behind craters and light-folded hills, their bodies woven of constellations, their eyes like prisms of sky. They floated, not walked, and carried great spools of radiant thread across their shoulders. Elian stepped back instinctively, but the starweavers only bowed in unison. You began the mending, one said in a voice that sounded like a choir. We will help you finish, said another, softer than starlight. Their leader, a tall weaver with hair like flowing comet trails, stepped forward and unrolled a scroll made of shimmering fabric. Upon it lay a great map of the shattered moon, marked with the 10 shards, each represented as glowing runes. You have 3, the leader said. But they remain fragile. They must be bound with the thread of light, not only by stitch but by belief. Elian looked down at his thread, which glowed faintly in his palm. I believe, he whispered. The starweavers extended their hands. From their palms flowed glowing strands, not just thread, but strands of memory and kindness, sorrow and joy, old lullabies and long-forgotten wishes. They wove it into his thread, until it shimmered like sunlight reflecting in water. And then, together, they began to work. One shard at a time, the starweavers floated the glowing pieces into the air while Elian stitched them together. He used the silver needle, now glowing like a star itself, and wove in lines of care and courage. With each stitch, the air vibrated. With each pull of the thread, a memory returned, an old night when a lost sailor looked to the moon for direction, a child who made a wish on its light, a mother singing by moonlight to calm her babe. The moon was not just a light in the sky, it was woven into the hearts of everyone who ever believed in something bigger than themselves. Elian paused as the 4th shard came into view. It was harder to stitch, it trembled, dimmer than the others, as if unsure whether it belonged. Elian reached out, not with thread this time, but with his palm. You do, he whispered. You're not too broken. The shard glowed, faintly, then stronger, and slid into place. A surge of warmth passed through him, as though the moon itself had sighed in relief. They worked on. When the 5th shard was joined, the starweavers sang. Their song echoed across the crater, across space itself. Elian couldn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. He felt them. You are not alone. By the time the 6th shard came, Elian's hands were glowing with light that wasn't his alone. It was borrowed from hope itself. And when he pulled the final stitch of that day, the partial moon in his arms gleamed like a pearl reborn. But the moment didn't last. The wind stilled. The stars dimmed slightly. And across the sky, from a rift of shadow, a voice whispered. You've sown your little light. But light cannot stand where truth is broken. You will see. A storm was coming, but Elian looked down at the thread in his hands. It was not just light. It was made of love. The wind returned, but it was no longer friendly. It howled through the craters of the moon like a beast awakened. The silver dust in the air turned dark, swirling into clouds of shadow. The starweavers paused their songs, their radiant spools trembling in their hands. Elian stood in the center of the moon's surface, the half-mended shards floating around him. The silver thread in his hand flickered, dimming slightly. The warmth that had once filled the air now chilled his bones. Then came the voice again. You are only a boy. It echoed from everywhere and nowhere. You are no mender. You are a mistake. A gust of shadow wind swept through the platform, knocking Elian backward. He fell to his knees. The stitched shards rattled in the air, trembling as if ready to fall apart again. The starweavers formed a circle around him, their lights glowing brighter, defying the storm. But even their presence dimmed as the doubt grew stronger. From the clouds, shapes emerged, shifting shadows with no eyes, no mouths, but with voices. Thousands of them. They whispered fears Elian had buried deep inside. You're not strong enough. You'll only break it worse. No one believes in you. You're just a lonely child pretending to matter. The silver thread slipped from his hand. Elian gasped, covering his ears, but the voices weren't outside, they were inside now. In his mind, in his heart, in the places he had never let anyone see. And worst of all, he almost believed them. He saw himself as the villagers saw him, quiet, strange, always staring at the sky. He saw the moon, still broken. He saw the stitches unravel. He saw himself failing. Maybe they're right, he thought, eyes wet with tears. Maybe I can't fix this. Maybe I was wrong to try. The storm pressed tighter. The shards began to dim. Even the starweavers, beings of light and legend, were falling to their knees, their constellations flickering. Then, a warmth, soft, gentle, a voice, familiar. There's no wrong way to care. Old Nan's voice, the one from his earliest memory. Every stitch you try means you're trying to love something back to life. Elian opened his eyes. The shadows still swirled. The doubt still whispered. But now, there was something else. A glow, not from the moon, or the starweavers, but from inside him. He reached into his satchel, past the thread, past the shards, and pulled out something simple. A tiny cloth rabbit. Old, worn, stitched by his own hand when he was 5. Its ears still crooked, its seams uneven. He clutched it to his chest. I've always been a mender, he whispered. And then louder, through the roar of wind. I am enough. The storm howled, but it cracked. The darkness recoiled from the light bursting out of him, raw and real and bright. The silver thread leapt back to his hand. The stitches in the moon solidified. The starweavers rose, their eyes blazing. Elian stood tall. You can whisper doubt, he said to the shadows. But you cannot stop someone who chooses to hope. With a cry, he lifted the needle once more. The thread wrapped around his fingers like lightning woven with love. And the storm, it shattered. Like glass against truth. The shadows were blown away into stardust. The voices fell silent. The darkness was gone. And Elian stood alone beneath the sky, heart racing, breath unsteady, but whole. The silence that followed the storm was not empty, it was sacred. Stars blinked open once more across the sky, brighter than Elian had ever seen. The starweavers bowed low to him, their constellations shimmering proudly. The silver thread in his hand gleamed with quiet power, now stitched with every step of his courage. 6 moon shards now hovered around him, sewn into a glowing crescent shape, still incomplete but strong. Elian looked at them, then toward the stars, a strange tug in his chest. Something was calling, not from outside the moon, but from within him. He placed a hand on his heart, where the warmth pulsed strongest. His satchel, now weightless, opened as if by breath, and the needle floated out once more, this time glowing gold, not silver. Then came the voice, not the cruel one from the storm, but something gentler. Familiar. The last shard has never been lost. It was always within you. Elian blinked. Inside me. He fell still. Remembered how he had watched the moon since he was small. How its sorrow had become his own. How he had wished, night after night, not for gifts or miracles, but for the broken light above to be whole again. He had loved the moon before it called to him. He had carried its pain before it broke. And now, he carried its final piece, not in his satchel, but in his soul. A shimmer passed over him like a veil being lifted. From his chest rose a shard, unlike the others. This one was not shaped like glass or stone. It was soft, glowing like dawn, and when he held it, it pulsed in perfect harmony with the moon's heartbeat. Tears welled in Elian's eyes, not from sadness, but from knowing. This piece had been his all along. The piece made of empathy, of belief, of love. He floated the final shard to the center of the crescent. The moment it touched the others, a light burst outward like a rising tide. The moon no longer trembled. It sang. A deep, beautiful note spread across the sky, a harmony woven from sorrow, healing, and hope. The starweavers lifted their hands, and silver lines stitched the last of the seams closed, locking the heart back into place. The moon was whole, but it had changed. The cracks remained, fine, glowing lines that shimmered like veins of light. They were not signs of weakness now, but of survival. A reminder that even broken things can be beautiful when held with care. Elian stood beneath it all, glowing faintly himself. You did not just mend the moon, said the lead starweaver, voice warm with reverence. You mended the belief that it could be mended. The sky shifted, and a path of stars unfolded from the horizon, leading home. You may return now, the guardian continued. But you will never be the same. And neither will we. Elian nodded, a quiet smile on his face. Thank you, for believing in me. He turned once more to look at the moon. No longer cracked, but shining through the cracks. The starlit path to home shimmered beneath Elian's feet like a silver ribbon. With every step he took, the sky behind him seemed to hum with peace. He no longer walked the way he had before. Not just because he had traveled through the moon's heart or spoken to guardians of the forgotten sky, but because something inside him had changed. He had become a keeper of light. As he stepped back through the last portal, his village came into view. The familiar rooftops, the quiet hills, the stream that always caught the first light of morning. But something was different. Children were looking up. Old men pointed to the sky. Mothers clutched their children and whispered, "Do you see it?" Above them, the moon shone, not only full, but glowing with threads of gold that formed soft lines across its surface, like gentle stitches. Where once there were cracks, now there was light. It was beautiful. Elian stood quietly at the edge of the village, watching the moon's soft glow brush the earth in silver. Behind him, stardust still clung faintly to his shoulders. The silver thread he had once used to mend the moon was now woven into the cuffs of his coat, glowing faintly with each heartbeat. A child ran up to him, eyes wide. Did you see it? She gasped. The moon, someone fixed it. Elian smiled softly. Yes, he whispered, I think someone did. He did not tell them about the cloud ladder or the Luma tree, or the whispering guardians, or the moon's fractured heart. He didn't need to. It was enough that they looked at the moon and believed again. That night, people watched the sky longer than they had in years. Wishes were made, stories were whispered, and Elian, seated quietly beneath the old sycamore near his window, looked up and whispered one last time, thank you for letting me try. And the moon blinked. Just once. As if to say, thank you for caring. From then on, people noticed something strange about Elian. He never needed a lamp. Wherever he went, a gentle glow followed him. When people felt hopeless, they said, talk to the boy who shines. And when someone felt broken, truly broken, they'd sometimes find a tiny silver thread left on their doorstep, one that seemed to hum with quiet warmth. Elian never said if he left them. But some things, after all, are stitched not with words, but with love. And in the sky, the moon kept glowing, not perfect, but whole. Just like the boy who mended it. Crescent moon moral lesson. True healing begins when someone dares to care. Even when things seem too big, too broken, or too far away, kindness, courage, and belief can bridge impossible gaps. The cracks in the moon didn't disappear, they became threads of light because Elian dared to believe they mattered. Everyone carries a piece of the moon inside them, a shard of hope, of sorrow, of light. And everyone has the power to help mend the sky. For more motivation stories, please like, share and subscribe this channel. Thanks and God bless.